When one thinks about the most consistent tennis players on tour, especially on hard courts, Daniil Medvedev is a name that surely comes to mind. It is a very common sight to see him in the later stages of the most important tournaments, except those that are played on clay, on which, from time to time, he does put in some solid performances as well. This year has not been an exception to any of that. However, for some reason, Daniil has flown under the radar in 2024. Not because he didn't achieve great results, because actually he did. He had a very good year, which I'm sure most of the players would have loved to have. But for what he has gotten us used to, this season we did not see him win any tournaments, and he has struggled to find ways to defeat the top players of the season, Sinner and Alcaraz. Up until mid-2023, his head-to-head record against Sinner was 6-0 in favor of the Russian. However, from the moment Sinner was able to beat him for the first time in the final of Beijing in 2023, he has been doing it consistently. Now their head-to-head has gotten 7-all in the span of only a year, so yeah. Sinner must have become very annoying for Daniil. Against Alcaraz, the story is different. Their head-to-head is 6-2 in favor of the Spaniard, and Medvedev has only beaten him once since he became a top player at the US Open semifinals in 2023. His other victory was at Wimbledon's second round in 2021, when Alcaraz still hadn't won his maiden ATP Tour title. This year, these two youngsters upped their level, and Daniil has seemingly struggled to keep up with it. Medvedev started his season playing the Australian Open, without having played any events leading up to it. However, that did not seem to be a problem, as he had an incredible tournament. He reached the final, having played 3 5-set matches along the way, including a semi-final battle against Alexander Zverev, which he was losing by 2 sets to love, and managed to turn around. In the final, he played another 5-set battle against Jannik Sinner. On that occasion, Daniil was leading by 2 sets to love, but couldn't hold on to the lead and ended up losing the match. That was his 5th Slam final loss, and 3rd in Melbourne. Still, despite the tough loss in the final, it was a very good start of the season. The following tournament he played after the Australian Open was the ATP 500 event in Dubai. It was there that he suffered his first rare loss of his season against Ugo Humbert in the semi-finals. Not that he can't lose to Humbert, who is a great player and had a fantastic season, but that's a match that he would usually win. Apparently, he was dealing with an issue in one of his shoulders, and his capabilities weren't at 100%. Eventually, he would carry that problem over the rest of the season. Seemingly, he managed to get it sorted for a while, as he had a very strong sunshine double. Starting off, he reached the final in Indian Wells with some good wins along the way against Dimitrov, Rune, and Tommy Paul. He lost the final to Carlos Alcaraz by 7-6 and 6-1. First set was very contested, but in the second one, the Russian didn't show up. The following fortnight in Miami, Daniil reached the semifinals without losing a set, but lost very easily to Jannik Sinner by 6-1 and 6-2. Not the score we are used to seeing when Medvedev loses. At that point, it was clear that the Russian was having some struggles against the young stars, as this made it 2 consecutive losses against them. Alcaraz had proven to be a more difficult matchup for him from the moment he emerged, but he used to have Sinner dominated. Now it seemed like things had taken a turn, and Medvedev was just unable to hold on to their rhythm. Right after Miami, the European clay court season started. Usually this is not Daniil's strongest part of the year, as he does not enjoy playing on clay. That's not a secret. He played the 4 biggest tournaments on the surface, these being the Monte Carlo, Madrid and Rome Masters, and Roland Garros. Even though he might not have had a great result like he had in 2023 when he won in Rome, absolutely out of nowhere, he managed to win 9 matches across those tournaments. Judging his season's performance by those results doesn't seem the right thing to do though. In fact, at those tournaments, he didn't even reach the stages of playing any of the top guys. Let's say he's out of his comfort zone. On the grass instead, the Russian tends to feel a bit more comfortable. Without it being his favorite surface, he has had some decent results in the past. This year, he only played in Halle before Wimbledon. At the German ATP 500, he won his first round match against Nuno Borges and lost in the second round against Zhizhen Zhang. Judging by that performance and his latest results, he was not arriving at Wimbledon in his best form. However, at the All England Lawn Tennis Club, Medvedev delivered. He made it all the way to the quarterfinals, where Jannik Sinner was waiting at the other side of the net. On paper, it was going to be an extremely difficult match for Daniil, considering Sinner's level this season and also taking into account that the Italian's game is a very good fit for the grass surface. Maybe a bit surprisingly, Daniil managed to beat Sinner in 5 sets across 4 hours of battle. That surely must have been a very satisfying win for him. But unfortunately, there was not too much time to enjoy, as coming up next was Carlos Alcaraz, the defending champion. In the semifinals, it was another strong showing by Daniil, who managed to snatch the first set off Alcaraz, but eventually lost the following 3. In spite of the loss, it seemed like a positive week for him, which maybe could have changed his year, especially with the confidence that beating Sinner must have given him. However, that did not quite happen. After Wimbledon, things were a bit different than usual. Usually, players take a few days off and start preparing for the American hardcourt swing. This being an Olympic year, though, right after Wimbledon came the Olympics, held in Paris at the French Open venue. In spite of not being his favorite surface, and the effort of transitioning from grass to clay and then back to hardcourt, Daniil decided to play in Paris, citing that the Olympics are a special event worth participating in, even though his chances of obtaining a medal were slim. Eventually, he managed to pass his first 2 rounds, but lost in the 3rd round to Felix Auger-Aliassime. After Paris, he flew to North America to get his hardcourt swing started. Understandably, his results at the beginning were not too good. After all, the transition takes some time. But weirdly, he lost on his debut for the first time this season, and in fact, he chained 2 consecutive losses. In Montreal, it was against Davidovich Fokina, and in Cincinnati against Yuri Lehechka. Very odd considering the success he's had during that part of the season over the last few years. Those being his results going into the US Open, he was not expected to produce anything special at Flushing Meadows. However, when it comes to slam tournaments, Daniil doesn't fail to impress, not to mention when it's one of the hardcourt events. In New York, being the 5th seed, he did what he had to do. He reached the quarterfinals, losing just 1 set in his first round match against Lajovic. He was looking good, having played some good tennis. However, at that stage, it was Jannik Sinner again, who had already proven to be a complication for him earlier in the year, despite having beaten him the last time they played at Wimbledon. On this occasion, he could not repeat the feat and make it 2 in a row, and lost to the Italian in 4 sets. After the US Open came the Asian swing, which in my opinion is very representative of the year Daniil had. Firstly, at the ATP 500 event in Beijing, he reached the semifinals without dropping a set. In that round, it was Carlos Alcaraz who beat him once again, in straight sets. The following week, in Shanghai, he made it to the quarters. In that round, it was Sinner who eliminated him very easily by 6-1 and 6-4. Basically, Daniil has been winning a lot of matches throughout the year, but the fact that he did not manage to win any titles and always happened to struggle against these 2 players makes it look as if he has had a bad season. In that regard, we should not forget that he did not play a single ATP 250 event and only played 2 500s. Therefore, he prioritized the main events of the year, these being the strongest tournaments with the best players in the world. Even though he has won a lot of these tournaments in the past, the fact that he didn't do so this year doesn't necessarily mean he's had a bad one. What can be said with a certain degree of truth is that Medvedev's game has been a little bit off this season. His results were decent, but probably not as expected. A reason for this might be his serve, which has been completely off for most of the weeks. At least it hasn't been as clinical as it used to be in the past, when it would massively help him dig deep in tough matches. Very likely this might have to do with the shoulder problem he's been carrying, which at the same time probably has to do with the balls, a topic about which he has complained a lot. In most cases, tournaments use their own balls, which differ from week to week. Therefore, apart from changing surfaces, players are also changing balls week in and week out, which is not only a problem for their adaptation, but also, it can bring some physical issues. Daniil has been dealing with some shoulder problems throughout the season, which may have been worsened or even caused by the different types of balls every week. Especially in Shanghai, he was very vocal about this, criticizing the balls at the event, trying to address the decrease in his performance. Now, at the end of the year, he had his 3rd loss on debut of the season, against Alexei Popyrin in Paris-Bercy, and will now play the ATP Finals, which he has already won in 2020. In that event, he will inevitably face the best players in the world, and will most likely have another matchup against Alcaraz or Sinner, and maybe against both of them. Hence, it will be a good test for him to measure his form at the end of this season versus the start of the upcoming one, after all the preseason work. Will we see Daniil Medvedev back at the winner's circle, winning Masters 1000s and Grand Slams? I definitely think so. It will only be a question of time until he gets back to the level he has gotten us used to. If you enjoyed today's video, don't hesitate to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. There are a lot more videos coming up soon. Stay tuned.